So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And I say good afternoon, but I know that it's morning for many of us, especially here on the West Coast. It's also morning for me here in BC. So welcome to our first Learning and Development offering of the fall semester. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that I am speaking to you today from the unceded territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, also known as the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich First Nations, whose traditional relationship with the land continues to this day. I am a visitor to this territory since 2003 from the Nunavut Inuit territory of Labrador. Knowing that we're all joining here from different regions and places across the country, I'd like to take time to acknowledge the original owners, stewards, and caretakers of Turtle Island and the lands upon which we gather today. Acknowledging the stolen land that we are on is critical to grounding ourselves in these conversations around equity, diversity, and inclusion. As it's important to remind ourselves of the extensive history of inequities and injustices that are represented by the very land that supports the work-integrated learning experiences that we all work to facilitate. So if you would like, please do feel free to add where you're joining us from in the chat to acknowledge the Indigenous and ancestral territories that you're coming to us from today. And if you're not sure, you can visit nativeland.ca and see which territories you're currently residing on. So thank you again for joining us. My name is Jenny Nilsson, and I'm thrilled to be facilitating today's session. I'm one of the Regional Associate Directors with CEWIL Canada, specifically supporting the IHUB Funding Initiative, which has been made possible through funding from ESDC Canada. Many of you are familiar faces to me, and my home institution is University of Victoria, where I worked in co-op and career for the last 16 years. I'm really honored to moderate today's session and introduce you to our incredible speakers. Since we launched the CEWIL IHUB Funding Initiative earlier this year, many of you have asked what other institutions are doing with the funding. After all, part of the CEWIL fabric is learning from each other and sharing. You told us that you wanted to hear some of the success stories coming out of our funding and that you would like to take some inspiration from what other campuses are accomplishing. So that's what we're here to do today. We've heard your call, and this fall we are pleased to share a series of panels and workshops that will feature our IHUB funded projects. Today's webinar is the first of 6, with our lineup featuring a blend of dynamic panel presentations like we have today, followed by a more intensive hands-on workshop. This week and next, it's all about innovative WIL to remove barriers. Our next pair of sessions will feature entrepreneurial WIL, and our final pair of sessions this fall is focused on community engaged learning. The CEWIL Membership Committee and the Learning and Development Committee will also be hosting a session on October 13th on building community within WIL. And of course, we have our amazing town halls each month and our CEWIL AGM coming up in November. So it's going to be a really busy and exciting term. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to today's panelists who graciously volunteered today to tell us about their IHUB funded projects. We're going to start with an overview from each panelist, and after that, you'll be invited to join a breakout room with a panelist of your choice to further discuss the project and any learnings that may be helpful to your own practice. First up, we have Shannon Snow from the University of Prince Edward Island. Shannon works in the Experiential Education Department as the Work Integrated Learning Faculty Liaison, supporting faculty with any work integrated learning programming outside of the co-op programs. Shannon received a BA and a BEd from UPEI and pursued graduate studies from York University, completing an MEd, and a PhD in education is in progress. She has worked in teaching and curriculum support roles at York University, Seneca College, and Ryerson University before moving back to her hometown of Charlottetown, PEI 2 years ago. So thank you for joining us, Shannon. Shannon's going to be talking about the UPEI project, Reducing WIL Barriers Across Campus. Recognizing that there are many barriers that students with disabilities face in accessing WIL opportunities, and that those barriers look different for each student depending on their access needs and their WIL placements, UPEI Experiential Education worked with UPEI Accessibility Services to issue 10 bursaries of $1,500 each to students who are engaged in eligible curricular WIL programming through the spring and summer semesters. Shannon, I really look forward to hearing more. So over to you, Shannon.
Sorry about that. I wasn't sure if you were doing intros for all speakers.
No problem at all. Thank
apologies
you.
for that. Just sitting here. Yeah, so at UPEI, there's a few things that I'll talk about sort of contextually to set the stage for why we chose to conduct our summer kind of IHUB ask the way that we did. So one piece is that the experiential education department at UPEI is newly centralized. And so given that there's some faculty on campus that we're working quite closely with in terms of their work integrated learning, but there are lots of programs across campus that we're not necessarily as hands-on with. And we also do house some professional programs that we're not necessarily connected to in terms of placements or support. So we have a nursing program, we have an education program, we have an engineering program that works on project-based work. So there are some units on campus where they sort of have someone housed within that department to sort of do some of the programming that we do for sort of the rest of campus. So sort of heading into the summer semester, we wanted to find a way to reach students who are doing work integrated learning and to reduce those barriers. And knowing that the summer semester, you know, there's not as many students on campus. A lot of our summer semester courses take really different formats. So some of the courses are really short-term and really intensive. Some of the programs or some of the courses start later in the summer, some start earlier in the summer. So there's really quite a variety, and it's a little bit hard to have a sense across campus of what's happening. So where in the, I guess, winter of 2021, we had applied for more of like kind of a project that was like a contained sort of thing that we wanted to do within a specific class. We thought this summer it might be a better idea to sort of do something that we could, you know, broadcast across campus. So we created 10 bursaries valued at $1,500 each that any students could apply to if they were doing curricular WIL programming. And we decided to target students with disabilities. And part of that was that I would say in PEI, it's not that we don't have some domestic students who might be racialized, but a lot of those racialized kind of categories within the iHub funding, really we have more international students that fall within that category. And so we wanted to, you know, kind of find a group of students where there are some really meaningful barriers, where that funding really could open some doors for them, but not sort of dangling something for some of those racialized students where all of our international students wouldn't be eligible. And so we felt like working with students with disabilities would be a good inroad there. And as sort of mentioned in the intro, UPEI Accessibility Services work quite closely one-on-one with students with disabilities. And one of the things that they've focused a lot of their programming on, not exclusively, but they've been talking with students a fair bit over the last couple of years around sort of self-advocacy pieces. So we've worked with them in the past around self-advocacy workshops for students with disabilities and other students as well, to say, okay, so you maybe understand that you have some workplace needs, and how do you articulate those in a way that maybe your employer is more apt to be receptive to. So, you know, sort of strategies for self-advocacy and strategies for identifying what you need to be successful in a given work situation. So understanding that some of that sort of legwork had already happened through accessibility services, but that the funding really would enable them to kind of take that to the next step and potentially, you know, purchase things that they need, maybe take some time off of work so that they can protect their energy in terms of, you know, if they're going out on a placement, and maybe need to cut back on their part-time work hours or things like that. So we really wanted students to be able to work with accessibility services to identify what would meaningfully break down a barrier for those students. And even things that sort of came in that were a little bit more peripheral. So we had some of the students that receive bursaries identify, say that, you know, that maybe their ADHD medication was really expensive, and so they are using the funding to pay for the course that they're taking, but that, you know, that will sort of help them balance some of the barriers that they're encountering. So just understanding that for a lot of students with disabilities, there are just additional costs. Generally speaking, it really helped make some impact. So through the summer semester, we created, I think some of this is in the intro, but just to be thorough. So we created 10 bursaries valued at $1,500 each. We had 15 applicants total. So one of them didn't qualify because they weren't doing work integrated learning. One of them, and then 4 were declined, but we told them that in future iterations, we would kind of prioritize their applications. We tended to prioritize students who could kind of name some of those costs that might help reduce barriers. So we prioritized applicants where they were able to identify specific costs that connected to their disability. We prioritized students who had more kind of substantial or meaningful work integrated learning. So that could have been hours. That might be that they connected it a little bit more explicitly to their course content. The other piece that I think was kind of important in terms of the way that we went about things was that we created a screening form, because I would say understanding of what counts as work integrated learning or not on campus is kind of low. And so I think especially working with students with disabilities where they might have some cognitive kind of barriers there, we wanted to make it really accessible. And so we made the first kind of round just a screening form. So I just asked them very, very basic things so that we could identify if they were or were not eligible. And then the follow-up application, there was kind of like a second form that got sent to them if they qualified, where we asked for more detail to kind of gather the information that we needed for reporting and for kind of further evaluation. So that was quite helpful. We also suggested that if students needed, that they could call our office and complete the form over the phone, which no one took us up. Actually, no, one student did take us up on that. So that also is one way to just, you know, from a UDL sort of perspective, giving a couple of different options of ways that students could apply. So I'll maybe leave it there, but I'm happy to talk with folks in the breakouts.
Thank you so much, Shannon. That's a fantastic project. I bet people are going to be very interested to hear more in the breakout room. So next up, we have Vicki von Wagner and Loretta Ferreira from X University, formerly known as Ryerson. Vicki von Wagner is a registered midwife and educator in both Ontario and Quebec. She has worked on the X University faculty since the program started in 1993 and was the first director of the XU Midwifery Education Program. Her areas of research and activism are health policy for midwifery and physiological birth and supporting excellence in clinical teaching and midwifery in remote Indigenous communities. As a settler midwife of mixed European origin, she is honored to have worked for over 20 years with the Nunavut midwives who have returned birth to the Inuit communities of Northern Quebec. Joining Vicki is Loretta Freire, a graduate of the XU Midwifery Education Program from way back in its infancy. She has been working at the program for well over a decade. Loretta is the experiential learning coordinator responsible for most things placement related, be they midwifery, interprofessional, local, interprovincial, international, hospital, or community-based placements. In her past lives, she has worked in government with women living with HIV/AIDS and with pregnant and parenting adolescents. Her experience as a racialized or originally non-English speaking refugee to this country informs the way she does her work and lives her life. Loretta and Vicki will be telling us about their fund for displaced midwifery students. The Midwifery Education Program at Laurentian University closed on April 30th, 2021, stranding all students at all stages of the program. XU has taken in half of the students at all levels of the bachelor program so that they complete their degrees via XU. The Laurentian Midwifery Program had a mandate to provide access to midwifery education to Indigenous, minority, Francophone, and Northern Ontario students. Vicki and Loretta, please do tell us more.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and thank you for the opportunity to speak a bit about our project. This sort of came just out of real necessity when we took on the former Laurentian students back, I guess at the beginning of May after their program closed in April. There was suddenly just an influx, so our program grew by a third. And we're a small program with not a lot of staff, not the kind of resources you would expect to be able to take on these vast numbers of students. So this particular project specific will hopefully benefit 39 students at various levels of the program. So some of them are second year. And for those students, the opportunities would be for them to be able to travel, for example, to Toronto to take part in some key clinical learning opportunities, which are required for their work integrated learning, so for their placement. So, it's very difficult to do everything online. So if you're having to, learn how to do, internal examinations or blood draws or, all kinds of things, there's certain things that you cannot do online and learn them well. So that is where bringing them, potentially giving them some money to be able to come to Toronto to do those opportunities. That was one thing. The third year students are in interprofessional placements, so they're traveling around to do placements with obstetricians, with labor and delivery nurses, as well as with lactation consultants and ICU. There's lots of interprofessional opportunities. So sometimes they're doing electives with midwifery practices within Ontario or outside of Ontario. And so they need, again, support for the interprofessional opportunities. The last group that will benefit from some of this funding is our senior cohort. So they're in their last year of the program. So they are consolidating their work integrated learning in clinical placements with midwives to complete their learning to become midwives at the end of that key last 1 year of their program. What Jenny mentioned was a key part of why we applied for this funding, because this did strand our students who are the students who are now our students, who were working at Laurentian, who were students at Laurentian, and who were in the various streams, including Northern, Francophone, and Indigenous. So those particular students are marginalized and potentially disenfranchised to begin with. And so it was important for us to be able to provide some of the money to them. This project is for this coming winter. So unlike Shannon, we don't have a lot of reporting back of how many students.
Loretta, we lost you. We can't hear you.
Jenny, I think you can click request to unmute as the host.
Yes, I am just looking for that right now. It looks like she's frozen on my screen though, so
Am I back?
Yes,
okay.
There you are.
My
Great.
Apologies. My internet has been wonky, so here you go with your potential tech issues. So I'll turn it over to Vicki momentarily. I just wanted to say that because we have the disenfranchised and more marginalized students, because they are Indigenous, Francophone, Northern, they've lost those streams. And so we were trying to get some money to support them as best we could to be able to attend their midwifery placements and have some of their costs covered. Our students tend to be mature. The vast majority of them are female or non-binary folks. And so a lot of them have children. A lot of them are sort of the sandwich generation, where they're also caring for like older family members. So they do have increased costs and responsibilities over, someone who might be a typical undergrad student. And so the idea of the money is to hopefully be able to provide each of these students $500. Some of that was related to just administration. It was easier to, give a set amount, because we know that all of those students will be able to use that money for childcare, for transportation, to pay college fees if they're, going to a different province, for example, for a placement. Any of those transportation, so flights, rail travel, bus, gas, anything that they need in order to participate. And I'm sure Vicki will talk more about the fact that one of the issues that we know of is that those communities that many of these students come from are definitely underserviced. And they either do not have midwives in the community and have to, leave to attain birth services, or they may be, sort of coming, getting care from settler midwives, some of whom just come as locums. So people come and go to those communities. So it's very important to support students who would be like culturally able to provide the best care, potentially in their own languages, to folks in their own home communities. So I will let Vicki say anything else she wants to add.
Thanks, Loretta. You basically said it all. I'll just add a few maybe contextual points. Our program, like many professional programs, but perhaps especially our program, is deeply work integrated learning. our program is 50% placements. So students spend a lot of time in work integrated learning, and we really love our model of integrating the academic and what we call the clinical side. So students are both engaging in a virtual classroom while being placed all around the province in different clinical placements, but coming together on a weekly basis to do their academic learning. So both throughout the program, their clinical learning and their academic learning, follow a path of increasing complexity, responsibility. And our students definitely see the work integrated learning placements as the most rewarding, the most wonderful, and simultaneously the most stressful and difficult. Like, both are absolutely true. And yes, our university, we are in the dish with one spoon territory, ex-university in Takaranto. And but our placements are, particularly having taken in the displaced students from the former Laurentian regions, they are as far as Attawapiskat, Kenora, Thunder Bay, etc. So they are reaching all over the province. And so one of the most stressful parts, and one of the barriers that our work with you is able to facilitate, is to address the costs that Loretto talked about. And they're costs that are both financial and also personal. As Loretto mentioned, the idea of having a family and possibly either leaving or moving children, a partner with a job, etc. It adds a lot of, there's a lot of anxiety leading up to our placement process, which is a lottery. So there's a lot of uncertainty. COVID has been very, very difficult for all health professional programs in terms of finding placements, the reduction of placements, the restrictions on placements, the heavy duty monitoring of placements, which has added an incredible administrative load, which Loretto has largely been the recipient of, a really increased burden of administrative monitoring related to COVID. Precautions and pandemic, all of which are hugely important, but which basically quadrupled our workload. So our ability to be flexible and responsive to the student body through the stresses has really been strained, and we are very grateful for the opportunity to try and address that through the support of CEWIL. So yeah, students really appreciate the placements, but there's been a few of which have been embedded in the program from the beginning, which you are supporting, but also some more new innovations that I just want to mention. And one is that since the beginning of the program in '93, we were given the mandate to have an Indigenous admission stream, which led to the development of what we call designated placements. So we have, Loretto mentioned this, but our placements are specifically designated to those students who self-identify as Indigenous or who have been admitted to a Francophone stream or a Northern stream. And that means we can prioritize the students from those communities to those placements. More recently, we expanded the options for Indigenous students because we had found that Indigenous students from across the country were coming to ex-university, in part because we are the only midwifery program across the country that has two amazing Indigenous leaders teaching in our faculty. So we're attracting students from Indigenous communities across the country who want to return to their communities. And we really, again, any of you who are involved in placement heavy programs know the administrative burden of, for example, having hospital contracts to allow our students to access the hospital settings. And for us, it's not just hospitals, it's also community-based organizations, including midwifery practices that the students have to be linked to. And for every placement, there's often at least 2, if not 3 or 4, or even sometimes more, different organizations that we have to have contracts with. So the bureaucracy is a really significant barrier that is just important to address in our infrastructure. And again, we're grateful for that support. So we did expand the possibility for Indigenous students from other provinces or territories to be able to return home. And again, you can imagine the costs and the barriers, the hoops to jump through related to that. The other innovation I'll just mention, and then I think we could be open to move on, is simply that and we also recently have responded to some real activism on behalf of our students to also create self-identified Black designated placements for students who self-identify as Black, to provide that kind of cultural safety and mentorship. So that also allows students to cross Ontario. And sorry, I should have mentioned way at the beginning that we are a consortium program. We were in a consortium with Laurentian, and now it is McMaster and X University. So we're really excited about all those opportunities, and very, very grateful for the support to make those things realities, because sometimes they're great ideas, but just actually making them work needs a lot of support.
Great. Thank you so much, Vicki and Loretto. That sounds like an amazing program, and wonderful that you were able to support the students coming from Laurentian once it closed. So that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. I think there will be many people interested in hearing more about that in the breakout room. Moving right along, we have Jeanne Perridge from Camosun College in BC. Jeanne is the chair of the Department of Community, Family and Child Studies at Camosun. Her areas of advocacy, research, and practice include early years, decolonizing education, UNDRIP, land-based and inclusive pedagogy, LGBTQI, P2S AA+, civil human rights, social justice, food security, and environmental sustainability. Jeanne is going to be telling us about her project that began in January, Early Learning and Childcare Diploma Students with Community Mentor Collaborative Provocation Workshops. These Planting the Seeds of Community Practice workshops explored what quality of care means for Indigenous early childhood educators, exploring the Indigenous Early Learning Childcare Framework and the BC Early Learning Framework, pedagogy of communities of practice, seeing and feeling the value of weekly circles, and the value of mentor stories and oral storytelling and how it can influence students' work, as well as challenging dominant developmental theories. So Jeanne, I'll pass it over to you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm thinking I want to go to Vicki and Loretto's breakout room. Anyways, we'll have to connect again. Yeah, so thank you for having me here today. I wanted to begin just prior to this project and tell you a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing in our early learning and care program at Camosun College. In BC, it's a little bit different of curriculum than it is across Canada. So every province is a little bit different. So we have a diploma program, and within that, the government does mandate 450 hours of practicum hours. So it is very practicum heavy through that time. It makes it quite challenging for people who may be working in the field and wanting to get their certification. So that was one of the things that we looked at a few years ago, and we began a separate work integrated learning project where we took clusters of courses and offered them to students who were working in the field. And we partnered with a Victoria Native Friendship Center and a few other programs that had a large amount of staff who were supporting early childhood educators, but who were not certified as early childhood educators. And in our effort was really about decolonizing education and using the workplace and the community as the classroom, not for practicum, but for theory courses. And so that's how our work kind of began. And so we took this cluster of courses, and a faculty had these 5 courses that they're teaching with all of their learning outcomes, and worked with alongside people in their field of practice and helped them pull out of the practice some of the learning outcomes that they were doing, where they felt that they had gaps in learning needs, gave individual resources of readings, videos, interviews, conversations in order to meet those learning outcomes. So basically individual kind of learning plans and a weekly community of practice in which the students who were in that pilot project kind of talked about how they were working to meet the learning outcomes within their cluster of courses, all of them with totally different paths because they were coming with different strengths, different knowledge, and different skills. And so all of those were being recognized, but not in a PLA kind of way, not in a prior learning assessment, but in a real time, how am I seeing this in your practice right now? And so through that project, which we had 2 different cohorts go through that, we found so much success, but we also found we made a lot of connection with community. We have 2 faculty who, Indigenous faculty, and as well as our program leader, who were connecting with community around, how do we work in partnership? How do we work in collaboration? And how do we work in the spirit of reciprocity around supporting students to get the certification in post-secondary? And for some of those students that did that project, that was their first time engaging in post-secondary because it was a path that they had kind of blocked as not interested for them. And through that partnership, we found that there was a lot of interest because now they have relationship with the faculty, and they had an understanding of that they had the capacity, and that education can look different than what they thought it would look like. So that's what inspired us for this project, is that we realized that the gaps that we had in that project is a lack of time and resources to really make more out of those communities of practice. It's really, in our work, what we've been doing for a number of years is challenging the idea of mentorship, in that some of the traditional sort of hierarchical, patriarchal forms of mentorship is that the student goes with a mentor in the field who's the expert. And I would say we're challenging that belief in that maybe not to be the case. And in fact, wanting to bring students and mentors together when they're in practice, in practicum, in a partnership, so that they're collaborating together. They're thinking about ideas and practice and culture and values together, and they're navigating, negotiating, and sharing perspectives in a collegial, even way. So the hierarchical is gone. And so with this project, what we did is we had another cohort of students who were in a program that we got, an early learning and care program that we got special funding to offer. And it's a responsive, Indigenous, community-based early learning and care cohort. The gaps were that we didn't have the funding and whatnot to do more, right? It was still just the courses. So through this CEWIL project, we were able to invite the mentors and the students together to come and hear from community leaders, from their local First Nation, from Indigenous community, but also non-Indigenous leaders in their field, and share some of their ideas. So the things that we talked about, particularly in this this series of workshops, Jenny mentioned a few, but we talked about, we explored what is a community of practice and how does it work? And so we explored it together with the mentors, and we kind of remodeled it with them through this series of workshops, and then supported them to continue on. A big part of the workshops is also that we were in COVID. The local First Nations communities were closed to visitors, but they did have permission from their community and their community elders to go out for education, to continue to do that. And so some of the childcare centers were not running and others were, but we were able to offer a safe place on campus where we had space and they could come together in a way that they felt comfortable. And they kind of owned the place because it was pretty empty. So it felt really great that we were able to continue to do that. But then they explored these things together. So in some of the workshops, we started with the students, and then at lunchtime, the mentors arrived, we shared food, and then we carried on and had maybe a presenter, and then they talked about it together. So they're all hearing the information at the same time and exploring it, thinking about it together. And so that was a really big part of the learning. So the WIL funding helped us offer money for transportation, money for childcare. A lot of the students in this program are predominantly female Indigenous students. In that particular cohort, in our responsive Indigenous community-based cohort, we had multiple generations coming as students, which was such a gift in the ability to share childcare practices that are valued in community. And so it's really, it created an opportunity to create dialogue where everybody felt that what they had as gifts was well received by one another. So it created safe places to explore pedagogy, but also to challenge some of the dominant theories around development, for example, where they're saying that story never fit for me in my community, and now I'm hearing that there's other stories. So that was I guess in a nutshell, those were the circles that we created. And then we supported them to continue on, that they would, we got support with the WIL as well for staff who were mentoring to have a sub come into the center so they could come off the floor and meet with students in those communities of practice towards the end of their workday. So they had time away from the work to really connect with the student, not in a formal meeting like your orientation meeting or your midterm check-in or your final, where you're being assessed. It was just a point of connection. And so they began to see the value of communities of practice, and that was supported throughout. And we're starting again on another semester with a new grant. So we're really excited about that. I think that's all I was going to say.
Telling us a little bit more about your project. I have to apologize, everyone. I have completely lost my Zoom, so I just have a blank screen. I can't really get it back, so I can't quite see the chat. So I apologize if you have sent me anything in the chat and that I don't see it. We will be going to breakout rooms in a little bit, and that I still have that functionality, so that should work well. Anyway, I'm going to move along to Pamela. Pamela is the chair and founder of Disability Studies Department at King's University College in London, Ontario. Her research is focused on how organizational cultures and structures can change the way that people imagine disability in more positive ways. She has worked most closely with people with intellectual disability and their service providers, but in founding the Disability Studies Department, her proudest achievement has been designing a pan-impairment intro course that attracts over 500 diverse disciplinary students a year to learn this new paradigm for disability, ableism, and inclusion. Pamela is going to be telling us about her project, where she ran an interdisciplinary course in accessible digital content production for, by, and with disabled people and content makers. It was a 6-week, all-online, asynchronous, intensive with disability studies students from 2 universities, King's as well as XU, and with instructors, both PhD, who straddle DS, gender, sexuality, and women's studies, and who had expertise in both accessibility assessment and new social media forms. Students learned key accessibility and media production tools and used them to help co-create innovative AODA-compliant materials. Digital research and design activities included gamification of education, document accessibility assessment, digital storytelling, and self-advocate podcasts and vlogs. So Pamela, please tell us a little bit more about your project.
Okay, well, you just did an amazing intro, so I won't repeat too much of that. I'll just pick up on the highlights. So yeah, I'm the chair and the founder of a disability studies program, which is an interdisciplinary social sciences approach. And just by way of a bit of background, my undergrad was in commerce at Queen's. And one of the things about being in a business school was that you're constantly being helped to think about what you want to do with your life and how the things you learn in school translate into work. But since becoming an anthropologist many years ago, I realized that my social sciences students don't understand that. We don't do a very good job in the university of helping them think about that translation of what they're learning in classes, how it can help them think about where they want to work. And so in running disability studies, one of the things I'm always looking for is opportunities for our students to bridge into the community. So we do a lot of community-based and experiential learning, but I hadn't yet had a work-based opportunity because frankly, we didn't have the budget for it. So I was really excited when we got this work integrated learning grant so that we could provide that opportunity for the students. So my two goals, one big goal was then to give them that chance to live into some of their skills by working with a partner organization in the disability sector. And then the second one is that one of the big shifts in the disability field right now, as with any of the sort of civil rights movements, is learning to represent themselves well. And that's a big challenge, but one of the great things about social media and the internet is that it's not expensive. And so the disability community has been really busting a move in that front. So we wanted to be able to give our students some of those skills. So as Jenny said, this course, we called it accessible online digital content production, which is something we really hadn't done before. But we got a chance to work with Ryerson, or X-University's Disability Studies Department, and they're kind of even more on top of the tech side, and also a community partner called Revision, which is a social media and content production company. So I'm going to do, I have three, rather than me talking, I'm going to show you three things related to what the course produced. I wasn't the instructor on it, so I'm going to screen share right now because I think this will give you the best view of things. And I'll go through it quickly. You all have learning management systems. At Western, we use the terrible, horrible one, but it is okay and you can play with it. So here you see a module for each of the weeks, and I'm just going to show you over here the digital storytelling one. We did digital storytelling, podcasting, how to make accessible documents. And let me just widen it out a bit. So you got your checklist of what to do, intro, some readings. And then here we had people with disabilities. So in disability studies, just like as in the Black rights movement or Indigenous movement, it's really important to have the scholars, the researchers, the community members speaking also be people with lived experience. So here's an example of someone who's TA'd for us many times, Kelly McGilvery, with one of the instructors, Jill Hoffman, who did a wonderful job. And they did a Zoom podcast or vlog about digital storytelling and the way that it's worked in Kelly's life. I might play a bit in the breakout if you want. This is Lily, who is our teaching assistant on the course. One of the things that CEWIL does is encourage you to hire people with who identify with lived experience in marginality to teach in the course. So Lily is blind and various other things, but she was really wonderful as a teaching assistant, helping the students to think about it from that side. And here's another example of a video. This was an all online course. So this one is about how do you edit YouTube captions? So we know YouTube does a certain amount, but you need to edit them. And it seems really basic, but it's so huge for people with disabilities so that they are not getting these ridiculous sentences that they can't make sense of. Yeah, and then a link over to the forums, just to give you an example. I'm sure you all have that. We could go in and make comments on all the videos and get some participation marks. The next thing I want to show you, just a second, quickly, is that they made a website. So since it was a digital content production course, the Jill Hoffman and Mel Stone, the two instructors, helped make a Wix site. And then the students were all engaged in putting their information up there. So again, not just knowledge production, but knowledge translation and dissemination too, because we know if you just write it and sits on your shelf, it doesn't really help. So here's an example. They each gave a little bit about themselves, chose their own photo, and then you could link to a digital story each of them had to make about something for their own life and what they want to share about their own experiences with marginality. Okay, and then the last thing I want to show you is we were lucky to be able to do with our communications office a little video. It's only 2 minutes, but I think it will give you the students' voices, which are probably more important than mine. So I hope you enjoy this piece. In the Disability Studies department, we want students to learn that they can positively influence systems and structures in society to improve accessibility in the online world through changing the stories that we tell.
I really enjoyed the course. I came to the course with little knowledge of what it means to have a technology that is fully accessible. As an educator, it's very important for us to know what an accessible technology is.
I feel that this course is fundamental in teaching people with disabilities, including myself, how to engage with an ever modernizing world. Because as people with disabilities, just as anyone else, we are creators, we are learners, we are thinkers.
The professors were an invaluable repositories of knowledge, along with an immeasurable dose of caring and compassion.
In a pandemic summer where jobs were scarce for students, this work integrated learning grant was a forward-thinking way for the government to support students to translate their classroom learning from university into real-world change.
The IHUB funding has been extremely beneficial, especially in COVID. With the knowledge that I've learned in this course and all the experience that I've gained, I've been able to secure a part-time position that allows me to use all of that.
I thoroughly enjoyed the creative component of the course, where we were given the opportunity to create an accessible podcast, digital story, and a game.
We are so grateful to the federal government for providing us with the funding to offer our disability studies students the opportunity to engage in these paid internships. It's a wonderful way for our students to bridge the knowledge they've gained here at the university with working in the community.
Okay, did I stop screen sharing properly? Can you hear me?
I have no idea because I can't see.
Oh, you can see. Okay, I'm
Yes.
just looking at you. Okay, let me go back to
Yes.
here.
You
Okay,
did,
so
Pam.
I think if I have 1 minute left, I think we were also supposed to talk about challenges. So I guess I'm just going to my list of challenges, sorry. I think the biggest thing that we found, so you heard in there some of the benefits. The students got lots of skills. They were really excited. They couldn't believe how actually straightforward it was to learn a lot of these accessibility and content production skills. So they're really excited about that. But I would say a couple of challenges: timing. That was so hard to put together a thoughtful, excellent course. And I'll give credit to Jill Hoffman and Mel Stone, as I said, who did pull the course together and did a great job, but they were rushed off their butts. And I was pressing them, and we were all, especially some universities, I think, have more support for unusual projects like this. King's is a small sort of branch of Western, and we don't have that. And so it kind of incumbent upon me and financial services and students with services for students with disabilities to do a lot of that. So a little more breathing space if CEWIL, Jenny, I'm sure you've heard that a million times, but a little bit more time to do the hiring, get the contracts right, get the industry partner arrangements right. And working across 2 universities, I had no idea, because we had 2 chairs and 2 academic deans from XU and us who were totally on board. So we had lots of, on high agreement, but it got very complicated. The tuition across universities, the letters of permission, accessing student transcripts, like stuff you'd think is straightforward, was a lot. So a little bit more breathing space would be just amazing. But the initiative is good, and the students liked working with someone from another university. And we actually now continued on, got an eCampus grant. So we're going to be able to continue the work. Contract wise, my big learning was I had part-timers doing this. And what my big learning was academic freedom and union rules don't jive well with following funders' requirements. Right? So CEWIL has these things, you have to do this, this, and this. And then you have, part-time or full-time instructors, it wouldn't matter, saying, I don't want to do that. So you should build that in up front if you're going to do that, which I didn't think to do because we were all talking loosely and it seemed good. But getting those contracts right is important. Similarly, with your community partner, it was interesting listening to Jeanne and Shannon and Loretto and Vicki. It sounds like maybe you had longer term relationships already. We brought in revision and we didn't have that same relationship with them right away. So it was a lot of work to get straight who's doing what. And the last thing I would say around paperwork, so there's a fair bit of paperwork, whether the LOPs and the tuition and all that, but also the surveys at the end for people who already identify as marginalized, especially in our case, we had about 90% identified as either disabled, racialized, mature students, etc. So I could really see a role for CEWIL helping out more with that. So when students get brought in right away up front, there's a kind of, let's fill in this demographic info, let's get these support things in place. And, or I understand from Jenny, I didn't know that we could ask for a project manager. That would have been good because Pam Cushing's project management skills are tiny. So, so that's it. Thank you so much. It was a great experience.
Thank you so much, Pamela. That's fantastic. I am going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. We have about 6 to 7 minutes for breakouts, and then we're going to come back into the main session for a super quick wrap up. So I'm going to open those up right now. And so you should be able to join a breakout room of your choice. Please let me know if you are able to do that. Like I said, I'm having some tech issues and I cannot see anything. So I'm hoping that it's all happening as it looks on my screen, but I can't see any of you or the chat. So I am going to ask Charlene, maybe. Charlene, can you see if people are able to join breakout rooms?
I see people joining.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Do I, Charlene or Krista, am I supposed to join a particular one?
Yes, so you join
Oh,
the fourth option.
Right. Gotcha, gotcha,
Yes,
gotcha. Great.
yes.
I'm going. Thanks.
Hi, Jenny. This is Krista. How do I join a breakout room? I don't see.
I also don't know.
Oh,
So Charlene can assign you to one.
oh, okay. Yeah. I'll choose Pamela's. Yeah.
That's number 4.
If that's okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene.
Thanks,
Sorry,
Charlene.
who wanted to go to Pamela? Sorry, is it Krista?
Krista, yes.
Okay,
Thanks, Charlene.
perfect.
Thank you.
If anyone else is having challenges, I'm happy to assign.
How many people do we have left that haven't joined a breakout?
Only 2, 3 that are not CEWIL. 2, 1.
Great.
Yeah, just 1 that's not CEWIL.
Do you need some help joining a breakout? Is there still just one person?
Yep.
And who is it?
You may.
Okay, I
Just
still
one.
can't.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to pop her into a session?
They might just be listening from a distance and maybe it's just on. So I think it's okay.
Okay. So are you listed as the host now, Charlene?
I don't know. I just logged in as CEWIL support. So I don't know if I can take hosting on. I don't think I can make myself a host. Krista, you're a co-host though.
How do I do that, Charlene?
So if you click on participants,
Okay.
you should see CEWIL support, which is me.
I see invite.
I'll be right back.
So just don't click on the little arrow, click on
Okay.
actual like participants and
Oh,
then
yeah.
and
Okay.
then you'll see me and go to more.
I see you and I'll go to more. Okay.
And then you should be able to make me a co-host.
Says chat, stop video, pin, spotlight for everyone, and report.
Oh, so you cannot make me a co-host. Apparently. I'll see if I can request to be a co-host.
Well, like what can I do to help, Charlene?
I'll see when Jenny gets back. I think it's just a quick wrap up. So I don't know if there's anything additional that needs to be done.
Okay. Oh yeah, time is really going quickly. Like people, lots of good comments. And the chat is like a lot of praise, not a bunch of questions, which is, yeah. I'll tell Jenny that.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're not a bunch of questions, Jenny, in the chat. It's more like good work and, you know, is the recording available? Like that type of thing.
Yeah. I can see that there's no one in the midwifery one other than Loretto and Vicki.
Okay.
Just FYI.
Okay.
Okay. And Charlene, are you the host now?
No, she can't make me the host. What do we need? I can broadcast though.
It does say you're the co-host on mine, Charlene.
Oh yeah, it is now. Yes.
I'm afraid to turn anything off in case it ends the session. So I'm just going to stay here completely. Here. If I send you the PowerPoint, can you share the last couple of slides at the end? Or we don't have to share slides at all, but can you pop the link to the survey into the
into the chat? Is it in Teams?
No, I'm just going to send it to you now. I turned off my Teams because it kept dinging and I couldn't mute myself. So just a sec.
And just to make it really complicated, my mom is calling me, so I don't know if that's the doctor's appointment.
Okay, answer. I'll get somebody else to do it. It's good.
I can, Jenny. If you send me the survey in
I'm going to send it by email.
Oh, okay.
If I can send it by email, just a sec to open up an email. I closed all my stuff so that I wasn't making noise.
Okay.
And I can't close the breakout rooms, so I'm going to get you to do that as well.
Okay. When do you want to close them, Jenny?
Now.
You want me to? Okay. And just hit close. Okay.
All right. And and that gives them a minute to pop back. I just sent you by email the link to the survey. So when I say the survey, can you just put it to the chat?
Sure can.
Oh, my PowerPoint just closed too, so that's great. My computer picked a great day.
My internet has just been terrible for the past 2 days. Intermittent, freezing. I don't know what's going on.
I also can't tell when anybody is back. So can somebody let me know when everybody is back?
Yeah, people are slowly
back.
in.
Okay.
Yeah, coming back.
Well, it was a short breakout discussion, but I hope you all enjoyed it. Just wait a moment for everybody to come back.
Yeah, everyone's coming back, Jenny. The breakout rooms have just closed.
Great. I know Pamela had to leave for another class that she has to teach. So thank you, Pamela. And thank you to all of our panelists today for joining us. And thank you to all of you for joining us as well. Just a couple of quick reminders before we leave today's session. We have registration open for our Advancing Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in WIL seminar workshop that's happening next week. So you can go onto our website and join that. And then there's also one the following week on building community within WIL. So please also register for that one. Those are 2 great sessions coming up. And we have a post-event survey. So it would be great if you could send us some feedback about today's session. Krista is the link to that in the chat, and then also it'll come by email as well. And I understand there's been some questions about whether or not this would be recorded. We do have it recorded, so we'll have that available as well. So thank you. And I'm going to stick around if there are any questions. Unfortunately, I can't see any questions in the chat, so I'll need someone to be my eyes and let me know. But if you'd like to stick around and ask questions, I will stick around and do that. So round of applause. Thank you so much to our fantastic panelists. Thank you, Pamela and Shannon and Loretto and Vicki, and to Jeanne as well. So thank you for joining us, and thank you all of you. Ooh, something.
Jenny, I'm still monitoring the chat if there are any questions that come up.
Thanks,
Fantastic.
Jenny and Sean.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Pamela.
guys.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Pamela.
Thanks. Okay, bye.
I have a picture. That's all I have. I can see Charlene's face.
Lucky you.
Yay!
Is everybody coming back now? Are you starting to see anything now, Jenny?
I see you. I see you, Sean. It must be on
Okay.
speaker view for me. It's just a little box and I can't make it bigger.
Yeah, you're on speaker view.
Yeah, mine did that too, and then it came back after. So I don't know. Maybe
When I closed my little breakout room icon, the picture came back. Is there anyone still with us?
Yeah, I'll just slowly put them back into the waiting room. Okay. Just, you know, sometimes it's just us now.
Should we stop recording?
Yeah.